Welcome back to Episode 6 of Faith and Science in the News. This is your host, Frank Lyon. I again want to thank the Blues to Joy Ministry Project for hosting this podcast. This podcast will complete the final part of a 3-part series examining several theories that impact our understanding of faith and science. In each case, we have examined to what extent evidence and data support the predictions of each theory. In Episode 3, we reviewed Darwin's theory of evolution. We found that the data gathered over the years has not supported the predictions of the theory. In Episode 4, we also found that evidence has not supported the claims of the theories of young Earth creationists. That brings us to today's topic, Einstein's theory of general relativity. General relativity is a theory about gravity and how it affects the shape of space and time. Einstein was not an observational scientist. He did not look into a telescope and collect data to develop his theory. He performed what have been described as thought experiments. His initial effort was to solve a problem related to how the small planet Mercury's orbit was affected by the gravitational influence of the massive body next to it, our Sun. The issue was that Newton's theories of gravitation could not explain some deviations in Mercury's response to this tremendous gravitational field. Einstein developed mathematical formulas that, when tested against actual measurements of Mercury's orbit, precisely described what is known as its perihelion precession. Given that his theory was able to explain this time-space issue related to Mercury, that gave Einstein the encouragement to make more predictions that he recorded as exquisite mathematical equations related to his theory of general relativity and evolving into many other theories and predictions. Some of these have included gravitational time dilation, lensing, redshift, Shapiro time delay, black holes, cosmic background radiation, a universe that had a beginning, a universe that was not static, but expanding, and the presence of gravitational waves. There are even more predictions that you can reference online. The amazing thing is that when Einstein derived the mathematics describing these predictions, instrumentation and technology did not exist to even collect or analyze the data that would be able to prove the theory. Over time, the necessary technology came into existence, and in many cases, the development of the technology was driven by a desire to examine Einstein's predictions. The most recent validation of Einstein's theory was the discovery of gravitational waves that he had predicted. Research scientists at Caltech and MIT first began to develop a concept to look for these waves in 2008. The Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, or LIGO, L-I-G-O for short, was built. There are actually 2 observatories, one in the state of Washington and the other one in Louisiana. It is the largest project ever funded by the National Science Foundation. After initial failures, enhancements were made to the detectors, and in 2016, gravitational waves were detected. Collaborators received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2017 for their work. As of January 2022, 3 runs have been made, and there are now 90 detections of gravitational waves. It took over 100 years to develop the technology to verify one of Einstein's predictions. To date, every prediction made by Einstein, for which we have instrumentation allowing the collection of data, has been verified to be correct. Now, woven into the fabric of this theory that impacts the interface of faith and science are 2 important findings. First, The universe had a beginning and is not a steady-state universe made up of eternal matter and energy. Matter and energy were created. And second, the evidence points to a universe that is several billion and not several thousand years old. Old Earth creationists find the data supporting the general theory of relativity convincing in contrast to the lack of evidence for the other two theories we examined in previous episodes. So, back to the elephant in the room, the debate between Christians that are old Earth creationists versus Christians who are young Earth creationists. John Lennox, in his book, 7 Days That Divide the World, The Beginning According to Genesis and Science, likens this debate among Christians who are either young Earthers or old Earthers to the debate that raged from the 1400s to the 1700s between some Christian theologians that included Calvin and Luther and Christian scientists that included Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and Newton. He describes the first group as the fixed earthers and the latter as the moving earthers. The fixed earthers, that likely included most Christians at the time, based on an improper interpretation of Scripture, were convinced that the earth was fixed and did not rotate around the sun. Christian scientists, the moving earthers, were developing very good data that clearly demonstrated that the earth orbited the sun. It took 400 years plus before some in the church gave up a faulty interpretation of Scripture and accepted the data of the Christian scientist. One of the Christian scientists during this debate was Galileo. I, for the first time, read about Galileo's interpretive procedures in matters of faith and science in his book, Controversy of the Ages, Why Christians Should Not Divide Over the Age of the Earth by Cabal and Racer. Galileo had two assumptions and two interpretive steps. Assumption one is assume biblical inerrancy, not inerrant interpretation, but biblical inerrancy. Our debate is not about the facts of the Bible or science, but revolves around faulty interpretations of one or both. The second assumption states that nature and Scripture cannot disagree. Since God is the author of the book of nature and the book of Scripture, they cannot conflict when rightly interpreted. Given these two assumptions, the first interpretive step is that traditional biblical interpretations always govern unproven science. Galileo maintains a conservative principle here. If in doubt, stick to the Bible. His second interpretive step was that proven scientific theory requires biblical reinterpretation. That is what the fixed earthers had to do and admit that they were not interpreting Scripture appropriately. Again, that included Luther and Calvin, who were providing the faulty interpretation that the Bible only supported the view of a fixed earth. I'm an old earth creationist based on the abundance of evidence from science and the lack of any claims in the Bible as to the age of the universe. And there are many theologians who are not dogmatic about the age of the universe. Two of my favorites are John Piper, who leans towards an old earth view, and R.C. Sproul, who believe that the Bible does not provide a specific age for the universe, and that science can help us understand the natural world. As I close this review of the general theory of relativity, be sure to check out references in my blog related to this episode. Thanks for joining us for episode 6. This is Frank Lyon, your host. Looking forward to our next time together on Faith and Science in the News.